I never thought my life would turn into something you'd see on a daytime talk show, but that Tuesday evening changed everything. My name is Mark Thompson. I'm a 42-year-old single father raising my 16-year-old son, Alex, in what I thought was a perfectly normal suburban life. That is, until I walked into his room and found him with his teacher, Miss Daniels. It started like any other Tuesday. I had finished my shift at the accounting firm around 6 p.m., picked up some takeout, and headed home. Alex's car was in the driveway, which was unusual since he usually had soccer practice until 7. I figured practice must have been canceled. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary as I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. "Alex, I'm home," I called out, setting the bags of Chinese food on the kitchen counter. No response. That wasn't too strange either. Teenagers often had headphones on, or were too absorbed in their phones to hear their parents. I decided to change out of my work clothes before finding him. As I walked down the hallway toward my bedroom, I noticed Alex's door was slightly ajar. A strange feeling washed over me, parental intuition perhaps. I pushed the door open gently, not wanting to startle him if he was doing homework or on a video call. What I saw made my blood run cold. Alex was on his bed, and Ms. Daniels, his 28-year-old English teacher, was sitting right next to him, way too close for a student-teacher relationship. They weren't doing anything explicitly inappropriate, but the intimacy of their positions, the way she was touching his arm as they leaned over a book, it was all wrong. "Alex, Ms. Daniels," I said, my voice tight with confusion and anger. They both jumped, scrambling away from each other. Ms. Daniels' face went pale, and Alex looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Thompson." We were just discussing his essay," she stammered, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "In his bedroom? With the door closed?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "I should go," she said, grabbing her purse and practically running past me out of the room. Alex and I stood in silence for what felt like an eternity. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand answers, but I was too shocked to form coherent thoughts. "Dad, it's not what it looks like," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does it look like, Alex? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your teacher was in your bedroom with the door closed, sitting way too close to you. We were just talking about The Great Gatsby. I've been struggling with the essay, and she offered to help me after school. In your bedroom? Why not the living room? Why not the kitchen? Why not at school?" He looked down at his shoes. "I don't know." That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, analyzing every detail. The way Ms. Daniels had looked at Alex, the panic in her eyes when I walked in, the guilty expression on Alex's face. Something was very wrong here. The next morning I called the school to request a meeting with the principal. When I explained the situation, they sounded just as concerned as I was. We scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. Before heading to the school, I decided to check Alex's phone. I know, privacy and all that, but this was different. This was potentially dangerous. What I found made my stomach drop. There were dozens of texts between Alex and Ms. Daniels. Most of them seemed innocent enough. Discussions about homework, reminders about deadlines. But mixed in were messages that were clearly inappropriate. "I can't stop thinking about yesterday," she had written. "Me neither," Alex replied. "When can we meet again?" "How about Tuesday? Your dad works late, right?" My hands were shaking as I read through their conversation. This wasn't just a teacher helping a struggling student. This was something else entirely. At the school, I met with Principal Henderson and showed him the text messages. His face grew grim as he read through them. "Mr. Thompson, I want to assure you that we take this very seriously," he said, his voice serious. "We will launch an immediate investigation. In the meantime, Miss Daniels will be placed on administrative leave." I left the school feeling somewhat relieved, but also anxious about what would happen next. How would this affect Alex? Would he be able to finish the school year without too much disruption? Most importantly, was he safe? That evening, Alex and I had a long talk. He admitted that he and Miss Daniels had been meeting outside of school for several weeks. He insisted nothing physical had happened between them, but he admitted to having feelings for her. "She understands me, Dad," he said, tears streaming down his face. "She listens to me in a way no one else does." I felt a mix of anger and pity. Anger at Miss Daniels for taking advantage of a vulnerable teenager, and pity for my son, who was clearly confused and manipulated. Over the next few days, the investigation continued. I was called in for another meeting with the principal and a school board representative. They informed me that they had interviewed other students and found evidence that Miss Daniels had been showing favoritism toward Alex, giving him better grades than he deserved, and spending an unusual amount of time with him. The situation escalated quickly. The police got involved, and Ms. Daniels was arrested on charges of inappropriate relationship with a minor. The news spread through our small town like wildfire. Parents were outraged, and the school was under intense scrutiny. Through it all, I tried to be there for Alex. He was withdrawn and depressed, blaming himself for what had happened. I arranged for him to see a therapist, who helped him understand that he was the victim in this situation, not the perpetrator. It's not uncommon for teenagers to develop crushes on their teachers, Dr. Miller explained to me during one of our sessions. What's not okay is for the teacher to encourage or reciprocate those feelings. Ms. Daniels was the adult in this situation, and she abused her position of authority. As the legal proceedings moved forward, I received a call that would change everything. It was from Ms. Daniels' lawyer, asking if I would be willing to meet with his client. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Why would I want to meet with the woman who took advantage of my son? She has something she wants to share with you, the lawyer said, something that might change how you view this situation. I was skeptical, but part of me was curious. What could she possibly have to say that would make any difference? Against my better judgment, I agreed to the meeting. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a small cafe in the next town over. I arrived early, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and anticipation. Ms. Daniels walked in 10 minutes later, looking nothing like the confident teacher I had met at parent-teacher conferences. She was pale and thin, with dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Thompson," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I'm not sure why I agreed to this," I replied coldly. "What could you possibly have to say that would make any difference?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "I know you think I'm a monster, and maybe I am. But there's something you need to know about Alex." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. "He's not who you think he is," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been manipulating me from the beginning." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're going to blame the 16-year-old? You're the adult here. You were his teacher." I know, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "But he's not like other teenagers. He's different. He has a way of making people do what he wants." I was about to walk out, but something in her expression made me stay. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated, looking around the cafe as if to make sure no one was listening. "Alex has been lying to you. About everything." "About what?" "About his mother, for starters," she said, her voice dropping even lower. "She didn't die in a car accident like he told everyone." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Of course she did, I was there." "No, you weren't," she said, shaking her head. "At least not the way you remember." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. You're clearly trying to shift blame to save yourself." "Please, just hear me out," she pleaded, grabbing my arm. "I have proof." I hesitated, torn between my anger and a flicker of doubt. What if she was telling the truth? What if Alex had been lying to me all these years? "Fine," I said, sitting back down. "Show me this proof." She pulled out her phone and scrolled through several photos before handing it to me. What I saw made my breath catch in my throat. It was a picture of Alex's mother, Sarah, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. The timestamp on the photo was from just 6 months ago. "That's impossible," I said, my voice shaking. "Sarah died 10 years ago." "Did she?" Ms. Daniels asked, her eyes locked on mine. "Or did she just leave?" I stared at the photo, my mind racing. I remembered the accident clearly, the phone call from the police, the trip to the morgue, the closed casket at the funeral. But now that I thought about it, there were gaps in my memory, details that didn't quite add up. "Why would Alex lie about something like that?" I asked, more to myself than to her. "That's what I've been trying to figure out," she replied. "But I think it has something to do with why he targeted me." "Targeted you? What are you talking about?" She took another deep breath, her hands still trembling. "Alex knew who I was before I ever started teaching at his school. He knew about my past, about my connection to his mother. I felt like I was in a nightmare, a twisted version of my life that made no sense." "What connection?" "I've never met you before this year." "No, you haven't," she agreed. "But your wife has—" I was speechless. This couldn't be happening. It was too much, too impossible. "I think we need to start from the beginning," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And I think you need to hear it from someone else." She picked up her phone and made a quick call. "He's here." "Yes, I think he's ready." 10 minutes later, a man walked into the cafe. He was in his late 50s, with graying hair and a kind face that seemed somehow familiar. He approached our table hesitantly. "Mark?" he said, his voice gentle. "It's been a long time." I stared at him, my mind trying to place where I knew him from. "Do I know you?" He smiled sadly. "We met once, a long time ago, at the hospital after Sarah's accident." My heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" "My name is David Daniels," he said. "I'm Sarah's brother. And Emma's father." "Emma." "Miss Daniels. Emma Daniels." The pieces started to fall into place, but the picture they formed was one I couldn't comprehend. "Sarah never mentioned having a brother," I said, my voice barely audible. "That's because she changed her name when she left home," David explained, sliding into the booth next to his daughter. "She wanted to escape our family, to start a new life, a life without us. Why? What happened?" David and Emma exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. "Our family isn't like other families," David began, his voice heavy with emotion. "We have a certain ability, a gift, some might call it, others would call it a curse." I waited, my mind struggling to keep up with the revelations. "We can influence people's thoughts, their memories," he continued. "We can make them believe things that aren't true, forget things that are." Sarah hated it. She wanted nothing to do with it, so she ran away and changed her name. She met you, and for a while she was happy. "But what does this have to do with Alex?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "Alex inherited the ability," Emma said quietly. "Stronger than anyone in our family has ever had it." I stared at her, then at David, then back at her. "You're telling me my son can control people's minds? That's insane." "I know how it sounds," David said sympathetically. "But think about it. Have you ever noticed how things always seem to go Alex's way? How he can talk his way out of any situation? How people are drawn to him?" I thought back over the years to the countless times Alex had managed to avoid trouble, to convince teachers to give him extensions, to talk me into things I didn't want to do. I had always attributed it to his charm, his intelligence. But what if there was something more? "This is impossible," I said, shaking my head. "People can't do that." "Our family can," Emma insisted, "and Alex can too. That's why he sought me out. He knew who I was, who my father was. He wanted to learn from us, to understand his abilities." "So you started a relationship with him?" I asked, my anger rising again. "No," she exclaimed, her voice urgent. "It wasn't like that. At first, I just wanted to help him understand what he was capable of. But then, things changed." "What do you mean?" She looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "Alex started using his abilities on me, making me do things, say things, feel things that weren't real. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already in too deep. I felt a chill run down my spine." "You're saying my son was manipulating you?" "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And I think he's been manipulating you too." "About what?" "About his mother," David said gently. "Mark, Sarah didn't die in that car accident. She left. I felt like the ground had given way beneath me. No, that's not possible. I identified her body." "Did you?" Emma asked softly. "Or did Alex make you believe you did?" I closed my eyes, trying to remember the details of that day. The police officer who had called me, his face kind but serious. The drive to the morgue, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the sheet-covered body on the table, the glimpse of a face that looked so much like Sarah. But now that I thought about it, the memories were hazy, dreamlike. The police officer's face was unclear, the details of the morgue fuzzy. Had I really seen her body, or had Alex made me believe I had? "Why would he do that?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would he make me believe his mother was dead?" "Because he wanted you all to himself," David explained. "Sarah was planning to leave, to take Alex with her. He couldn't bear the thought of losing you, so he made her disappear from your life. And from his." I was speechless, my mind reeling from the implications. My son, my sweet, intelligent boy, was capable of something so twisted, so manipulative. "We need to find her," I said suddenly, my voice firm with determination. "If she's alive, I need to find her." David nodded. "I know where she is. I've been keeping tabs on her all these years. She's living in Oregon under a different name. She has a new family now, a new life." "Does she know about Alex? About what he can do?" "No," he said sadly. She cut off all contact with our family when she left. She has no idea about any of this. I stood up, my mind made up. I'm going to find her. I need to talk to her, to explain everything. Mark, wait, Emma said, grabbing my arm. There's something else you need to know, something about Alex. I looked down at her, my expression questioning. He's getting stronger, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. His abilities are growing, and he's becoming more reckless. He's not just influencing people anymore. He's starting to control them. What do you mean? I mean he can make people do things against their will, she explained, her eyes wide with fear. He's dangerous, Mark. More dangerous than you can imagine. I felt a cold dread wash over me. What has he done? Emma hesitated, glancing at her father again. Remember that fire at the school last month? The one that destroyed the science wing? I nodded. They said it was an electrical malfunction. It wasn't, she said, her voice trembling. Alex was angry at his science teacher for giving him a B. He wanted revenge. I stared at her, horrified. You're saying my son set fire to the school? That he could have hurt people? He didn't mean for anyone to get hurt, she insisted, but his powers are growing beyond his control.